Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Jared. Today I'm going to be installing a gauge holder that I picked up off Etsy into my V35, G35, Infiniti, Skyline. So this is the piece that I've got. It replaces the cubby inside the car with these provisions for 3 52mm gauges. It is made from a 3D printed material, as you can see. It's quite raw still, so my plan with this is I'm going to sand it down and actually paint match it to the silver interior of the car. If you're curious, these were the stickers or cards that came with the gauge holder, so if you're looking for it, it was off Etsy and I paid just over about 100 Australian dollars for this. It was hard to find any other sort of gauge mounts. My car being right-hand drive, a lot of the gauge holders for this pillar are for left-hand drive cars, so the gauges go that way and it doesn't work on a right-hand drive car. At least this way, this is just faces straight, it's not pointing towards the left or right-hand drive. And I'm going to put a wideband oil pressure and temperature and coolant temperature gauge in this later. As you can see here, my model comes with this cubby, which has a lid. Some models came with a pop-up GPS screen. For that, you're going to have to remove the whole GPS unit. It doesn't work. So this whole centerpiece has to come out in order to remove this top lid. I think it's perfect because I was worried that the rim of the gauge, sometimes it's larger that they might touch, but it's actually quite good. You just seen I had to open up that middle one to fit. The gauge on the left went straight in, but I haven't got the wideband gauge yet to fit up, but I just wanted to do any grinding or fitting before I paint it. So this is what the cubby looks like after about an hour of sanding by hand, because none of these surfaces are flat. It all has to be done by hand. So I've gone over it with 120 grit, and now I'm going to try and clean it up and spray it with some high fill primer to fill in as many of these grooves. It's really hard to get in these cracks here for sanding and on the bottom as well. So hopefully it turns out all good, no problems. So it's been 24 hours since I painted this in the filler primer, and you can see the finish is much smoother now. Some sections were really quite bad, and you can see in here that it's hard to sand, so they aren't as smooth, but the most of it now is pretty good. So the next step is we're going to wet sand this with some 800 before spraying the color. I've then gone and picked up this satin clear, because the satin clear matches the finish of the interior plastics on the Skyline better than a gloss clear. As you can see now, I've just finished wet sanding. I've been able to get most of those grooves out which I had on that side, and the sections between the gauges look a bit better now that I've matched the level. So I'm just going to dry this off and hit it with some wax and grease remover, and then we'll be ready for colour. So now you can see the finished product. It's all painted silver, and I've just thrown in these gauges here just so you can see what it's going to look like with them in. That is the back side of the gauges and the front. So the next step now will be to remove the center console and get it out of the car so we can take the lid off and switch it with the new one. First, in the interior, we're going to remove the shift knob. Then we're going to put it into 4th gear because this is going to make it easier to pull up and remove this lower part of the console. Don't forget to unplug the hazard light as well as the light for the ashtray. Then move on to the glove box by removing these 4 Phillips screws up the top. Then pull down on this lower tray, and then you have to pull off this kick panel. After removing the kick panel, it will expose another Phillips screw down the bottom left. After that, you'll be able to remove the glove box. It's a good time now to also change your cabin filter because you have quite easy access. Then you can go ahead and remove another Phillips screw holding the plastic piece on the side of the radio, and there's just a few clips holding that in. Then you move up top. This gets removed by pulling it towards yourself, and in my case I have the security light as well. Usually there's a Phillips screw up the top here. Then on the other side it's quite similar. You got to pull down on the plastic tray under the steering column. Then that'll give you access to pull the side off on the other radio, and there'll be a Phillips screw. Then moving on to the main radio, there's 2 Phillips screws underneath that need to be removed. After this, you can pull up from the bottom and you just got to lever it out from the top. Don't forget to remove this plastic trim. And then once you've gone and got that out, don't forget to unplug everything because we're going to move it over to the bench. Once you got the center console out, there's 1 screw there and 1 screw here. And that will remove this center cubby, and it'll be much easier to change over the top lid. So how it works is this end bit is spring loaded. So you need to push the whole end in and then you can lift it out. Then the new gauge holder. Goes in a lot easier than the old one comes out. It doesn't have the square drive, so when you lift it, it falls back down. There is the lid installed. I'm not 100% stoked with the color match, but I think overall it doesn't look too bad. It still, I think, is better than the black finish that there was, but maybe if I painted it just in a satin black it might have looked better. And it does get stuck a little bit on the sides, so maybe in retrospect I would have trimmed it down a little bit more on the side, but it does still open just with a little bit of force. The last thing I'll do before I reinstall it is I want to put a hole in this box just to pass the wires through for that gauge. That is what the hole looks like. I find using these step bits much better for drilling plastic, because the normal bits, they grab the plastic and they end up snapping it, where this one slowly enlarges it as it drills more. This will just be big enough to pass the plugs for the gauges through. I didn't do it on the bottom just in case I do put anything in there so it doesn't fall out the bottom. But yeah, this is just an opening for those gauges for the wiring to come through to the other side. So this is what it looks like finished now inside the car. I haven't put back all the other interior parts yet because the next part of this video is going to be wiring in all these gauges and installing the sensors. So stay tuned for the next video if you're interested in that. This video is just on how to install this holder and what the gauges look like installed there. So I think overall it looks pretty good. In the car with the different lighting, you can tell the color is different, but it doesn't look nearly as bad as it did out of the car. And I think overall I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously it would have been nicer if the gauges were on an angle pointing towards the driver, but this is a universal part for left or right hand drive people. You can still open that and get access to the cubby if that's what you want. But apart from that, I think it looks pretty good, and I'll be stoked once these are actually working and powered on. Alright guys, that wraps up another video. I hope you enjoyed this quick little video of installing these gauge holders. It's just something I wanted to do for some time now, and I'm pretty stoked with how it's turned out. Really didn't want to have to put one of those pillar pod gauge holders on in the car because it kind of looks a little bit ricey. I think this looks quite subtle and integrated in the interior quite nicely. If you are interested in how to wire up the gauges, I will be covering that in the next episode. We're going to have water temp, oil temperature, oil pressure, and also wideband oxygen sensor. Going to need all of these gauges to get ready for the upcoming dyno tuning, just to make sure everything's running perfectly before then. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If not, I'll see you for the next video. Cheers.